Hi there. In this episode, selected hardware effects. This is a top 11 list. If you've watched some of my other video episodes, you may know that I use both hardware and software effects in production, and I have the hardware effects looped into my DAW. At least as many as my audio interface will allow. This is a top 11 list of mostly affordable and a couple spendy hardware effects processors that should be on your list if you start looking for used hardware multi-effects processors. I could probably do 2 or 3 of these effects processor lists, and I may, so think of this as my first one. If your favorite processor didn't make it onto this list, it will probably make it on a later list. These aren't necessarily my favorite processors or ones that I have owned, but some of them are. Before I get into the list, I want to talk a little bit about hardware effects specifications, including the specifications that many folks find important when considering hardware effects processors. The first specification is one that is probably important to most people, and that's price. Price on used hardware effects processors have been going up over the past 10 to 15 years, and those price changes are starting to be felt now. Like many people in the 80s, I dumped some of my analog synths when digital synths came out. Who wanted that analog crap? I traded away my Realistic / Moog MG1 that now sells for $750. I sold my Roland SH101 for $50 and it now sells for $1,500 or more. I sold my Akai AX80 for $350 and that now sells for $1,000 plus. I believe this same cycle is happening with hardware effects devices. I just did a search of Sweetwater for rack mount multi-effects devices and there weren't many. 2 from Eventide, 2 from Lexicon, 3 from Bricasti, and 1 unit from Behringer. It really equates to 4 manufacturers and 7 products. I only counted rack mount multi-effects processors. If you go to the site and check it out for yourself, enter effects processor in the search box. You'll get about 2,000 matches, but this includes software effects and hardware effects and tons of them for guitar. I have Keyboard Magazine's 1993 Buyer's Guide. That's 30 years ago, and here it is. It states on the cover that it has a review of 29 multi-effects processors. I counted them up. 3 from Alesis, 2 from Art, 1 from Boss, 2 from Digitech, 1 from Dynacord, 1 from Ensoniq, 2 from Korg, 3 from Lexicon, 3 from Peavey, 1 from Rocktron, 1 from Roland, 1 from RSP Technologies. I don't even know who those guys are. 2 from Sony, 4 from Yamaha, and 2 from Zoom. 29 multi-effects processors from 15 manufacturers. To be fair, only 23 are rack mount devices, but these were great times. You had choices across a range of prices, quality, and other specifications. You can't blame current manufacturers for the lack of choice. Like folks in the 80s dumping their analog, folks dumped hardware effects processors and moved to software plugins. Of the current rack mount multi-effects devices available today, the Behringer has the lowest entry price at $159, but I don't know how good it is. Then you'll take a big jump in price to the Lexicon PCM 92 at $2,300, with the others costing more and in some cases a lot more. Of course they should cost more. They're from the heavy hitters in the industry. There's a price vacuum here on the low end, and Behringer is smart to have a product, essentially the only product that you can purchase new in the budget price range. This brings me to my top 11 list of products that you can buy used. These products fill in a lot of the space in that price vacuum. While some are 10, 15, or more years old, they still have specifications that are good or even excellent by today's standards. 24-bit, 48 kilohertz sampling rates, or close to that. At number 11, Sony DPS V55. This unit is over 20 years old and is well made. Its value is that it will process 4-channel surround sound. It sounds good for its age. It has decent rear panel connectivity on 1/4-inch connectors and 2 MIDI jacks on DIN connectors. When you hear there's only 2 MIDI jacks, generally it's a MIDI in and then an out combo through. Also, enough front panel controls and a list of effects on the face of it to make editing less of a chore. Its weakness is 20-bit converters at 48 kHz instead of 24-bit, and it only has a small 16-character by 2-line display. But that's going to be typical of these units. It wasn't cheap when it came out. They generally go in the $300 range, but I've seen them for as low as $130. On the hard-to-find scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being practically impossible to find, it rates a 5. There aren't a lot of them out there, but there are always some for sale on eBay and Reverb. I believe the fact that they were made by Sony and not some better-known manufacturer of effects devices has kept prices down. That's good for you. At number 10, Alesis Quadraverb. This unit is well over 30 years old and was one of the first affordable multi-effects processors, along with the Digitech DSP 128. At one point, I owned 2 of these processors, and I still own one, so take anything I say as potentially biased or objective, since I've owned it for a long time and I have experience with it. Its value is that it is cheap to buy, and when you want crap 1990s multi-effects or an effects processor to add as a dedicated line, say to a classic synth with no effects, this will do the job. Its weakness is that it is 16-bit with a 44.1 kHz sample rate. It has a small 16-character by 2-line LED display. You get 2 1/4-inch analog inputs and 2 1/4-inch analog outputs. You also get 2 MIDI ports on 5-pin DINs. I wouldn't use it on vocals, but for synths and guitars, it's not bad. Back in 1998, I was using it on vocals because it was the best processor I had. The display screens on these units have a tendency to fail after 20 to 30 years, but I think you can still call it a reliable unit. You can buy a user replacement screen for about $30, and they come in a bunch of different colors. I replaced mine with a cool blue one, circa 2018. It uses an external power supply, and when you need to replace it, it will cost you about $30. You can pick up an original Quadraverb for about $120. On the hard-to-find scale, it rates a 3. There are plenty of them out there. There is also a GT version that includes guitar effects like distortion, and a version 2 with better audio specs and a better screen, but it'll cost you more. Part of the original Quadraverb's appeal is how bad it is, in a good way, kind of like Yamaha NS10 studio monitors. At number 9, Yamaha Rev 7. This unit is 30 plus years old. Its value is that some people really like its reverb, which is arguably harsh. Its weakness is its 16-bit processing and a sample rate of 31.25 kHz. It has a small 2-line LCD display. It's a 2-rack space unit with a keypad, separate EQ knobs, effects mix, and input potentiometers. And it has more buttons than most processors of this time, which makes it a little easier to edit, but not a joy. My preference on this type of gear is to have parameter selection with buttons, but parameter changing with a rotary encoder of some type. It's just faster that way. They are known to be fairly reliable, with the biggest issue being the display and the power supply capacitors, which is to be expected on such an old unit. You can pick one up for about $350. When I'm giving you prices, they are approximate and based on units I found on Reverb and eBay in at least good condition. No road-weary gear that some rock god accidentally put in a blender when they were trying to make a margarita. On the hard-to-find scale, it rates a 6. There always seems to be some out there, but I've noticed they are getting harder to find, especially in good condition and especially with shipping from the USA. One issue with availability is that many of them are listed for sale in Japan and other countries. US owners tend to hold on to them. This is one unit that you'll commonly see for sale that needs repair, so be careful and read all the text before you buy. There is a Rev 5, and generally with Yamaha naming conventions, the lower the number, the better the unit. But from all accounts, some people think of them as very similar in sound and capabilities, but opinions vary. There is also a Rev 500, but I'll save that for a different list. The Rev 7 and the Rev 5 are the classic units. Number 8, TC Electronic M1. This unit came out circa 2000. Its value is that it has 24-bit converters at up to 48 kilohertz sampling rates. It has quarter-inch analog and SPDIF I/O. It also has a very nice display for the time that TC called their spectral display. For a while I owned a TC Electronic CCC and it had the spectral display, and it was a nice display. If you want XLR connectors, look for the M1 XL model. Its weakness is the same as all units from this time period: tedious parameter entry. There are no soft knobs. It was a direct competitor of the Lexicon MPX 500 as they were both out around the same time. From what I remember, I went with the Lexicon MPX 500 because of the name, quality of the reverb, that it has both XLR and quarter-inch I/O, and that it has soft knobs. But the M1 is certainly worth your consideration. You can pick one up for about $170. On the hard-to-find scale, it rates a 1. There always seems to be plenty of them for sale, both regular and XL, depending on whether you want quarter-inch or XLR connectors. Number 6, Korg DRV3000. I mostly included this unit because of some unique attributes. It has a wireless remote control. How often do you see that on an effects processor? Its value is 16-bit converters operating at 44.1 kilohertz, which was excellent for 1987 and still decent for a device that's heading towards 4 decades old. CDs were all the rage in 1987, and manufacturers were hitting those specs at the time. If I was harsher on some other processors on this list with CD audio specs, it's probably because they were made well after the 80s. I tried to be consistent. You get 16 effects types, which are a mixture of reverb and modulation effects. There is also parametric EQ. It has a mono quarter-inch input and stereo RCA inputs. It also has 2 sets of stereo output jacks, 1 pair on quarter-inch connectors and another pair on RCA jacks. It is capable of creating some type of surround sound effect. This is interesting and often makes me think that it may have been intended to be used in the living room as well as the studio. That kind of makes sense with the wireless remote and the RCA jack connectivity. Its weakness is parameter-based editing, a small LCD display, and almost all functions are controlled from the remote. So if the remote doesn't work, you're out of luck. Don't buy one unless the remote is included and working. There is a 2-character LED in addition to the 16:2 display, and some additional LEDs that light up to give you feedback. You can pick one up now for about $200, but prices vary wildly from about $150 to over $600. On the hard-to-find scale, it rates a 9. The reason it gets a 9 is that you can generally find 1 or 2 pretty easily, but finding one with a working remote and a remote that still has the battery cover is difficult. Number 5, Lexicon MPX 500/550. This unit is getting to be about 20 years old. This is one of my favorites for price and for sound. I own 3 of them, so factor in my bias when you are evaluating what I say. Its value is that it is an affordable device to buy and a good quality Lexicon processor. There are other processors in the MPX line that are not worth your money. If you're going to spend $100 or more bucks on an MPX 100 or 200, just spend the extra money and get a 500. It's a far superior processor. It has 24-bit converters, 48 kilohertz sampling, a friendly and easy-to-use interface with soft knobs and a nice display. Its weakness is it doesn't have the full-fledged parameter editing of the Lexicon PCM line, but it's also a quarter of the price used, and it sounds great. The 550 has the advantage of graduated VU meters in the display, a compressor function, and about twice as many user storage slots. I believe it's 64 instead of 30. You can upgrade a 500 to the functionality of a 550 with a ROM chip. I own two 500s and one 550, and I upgraded the 500s. The chips cost me $30 each, and the 500s now perform identically to the 550. The chips show up from time to time on eBay. There are guys out there that burn them with an EEPROM burner. I hadn't seen any in a while, so I contacted one of the guys on eBay that was burning other chips, and he made me two. I purchased one of my 500s new. The other one was $100, and the 550 was $150. This was about 7 years ago that I purchased the units used. You can pick up a 500 now for about $180. A 550 will cost you about $250. On the hard-to-find scale, it rates a 6. There are some of them out there, but they are coming up for sale less often, or they tend to be in other countries, so shipping is cost prohibitive. At number 4, Yamaha SPX 90. This unit will be 40 years old in 2025. I've always had a soft spot in my heart for this processor. A friend that owns a commercial recording studio in South Florida owned one of these processors in the late 80s, and I used it when I was at the studio. I remember it as having this really cool sounding symphonic chorus patch. I checked his website before recording this today, and it is still listed in his gear collection. Its value is that it is inexpensive. It has 16-bit converters at 31.25 kilohertz sampling, separate single VU meters, and a separate patch number display. Its weakness is that it only has a 2-line display with 16 characters per line and tedious parameter editing through a few buttons, which was typical for less expensive gear at this time. You can pick up one of these units for about $180. On the hard-to-find scale, it rates a 3. There are plenty of them out there, but like other units on this list, they are coming up for sale less often, or they are in other countries, so shipping is cost prohibitive. There is an SPX 90 Mark II, but I believe the only difference is longer delay times. The SPX 90 was a popular item, so Yamaha used it to brand several other processors with the SPX label, including the SPX 900, 990, 1000, and 2000. Number 3. Digitech TSR24S. This unit will be 30 years old in 2025. I owned one of these about 20 years ago, and I wish I still had it. Its value is that it has 18-bit, 48 kilohertz sampling, which is really good for 1995. It has 240 memory slots, which is very generous, and 24 factory effects chain algorithms. You can also create your own algorithms from the 78 effects modules by linking them together in practically any order based on available memory. It also has quad outputs. Its weakness is the same as all units from this time period: tedious parameter editing, though it does have a large dial for changing values. Also, this unit wins the prize for the most buttons I've ever seen on a single rack space device. It has more than 30. Yeah, and they're really small. It has a 16:2 display, a separate LED VU meter, and a separate 3-digit LED display. It also has 4 rotary potentiometers for I/O attenuation. You can pick one up for about $200, but like some other units, prices can jump around wildly. Originally, Digitech made a TSR-12 and a TSR-24. Then 2 years later, they came out with the S model, the TSR-24S. On the hard-to-find scale, it rates an 8. You'll find the 12 and the plain 24 pretty easily. But the S model is harder to find, especially in good working condition, and you definitely want the 24S model if you're going to buy one. Number 2, TC Helicon VoiceLive Rack. This unit came out in 2011. As a disclaimer, I own it, so take that into consideration regarding bias when I'm discussing it, because I am very biased when it comes to this device. Here's a little history. I purchased mine shortly after they came out. Tried it out when I got it, thought it was ho-hum, and it sat in my rack for 3 years unused. I was disappointed. Then I started looping hardware devices into my DAW and thought, what the heck? And that's when it started to shine. Its value is that it has 24-bit conversion at up to 96 kilohertz sampling. It has a great interface with soft panel controls, soft knobs, and a large display, possibly the brightest display I've ever seen on a device. It is primarily a Harmony processor, but it also has usable multi-effects. It has good connectivity, albeit with a few quirks. It does some really cool things with the touch of one button, like hard tune, also known as the share effect, transducer effects, also known as the AM radio effect, and synced modulation effects. Think of Boulevard of Broken Dreams. The Harmony creation is very good and some of the best I've heard in hardware. Its weakness is that if you use the USB port to connect it to your computer, it's only 16-bit. But you can get the higher conversion rates using SPDIF or using its analog connectors, which is what I do. When new, the list price was $799, but you could pick one up new for about $599. I'm thinking they didn't sell well, and that could be because people were as naive as I was when I got it, and I let it sit in my rack for 3 years. A used one will now cost you about $750. On the hard-to-find scale, it's the only one on this list that rates a 10. They don't come up for sale very often. When you do see them, they are often in Europe or some other country far from the US. Prior to recording this episode, I looked on Reverb and eBay. There were none on eBay and only one on Reverb, which was in Paris, and not Paris, Texas, Paris, France. I'm so glad I have mine. Number 1, Lexicon PCM81. This unit came out circa 1998. Once again, as a disclaimer, I own it, so take that into consideration regarding bias when I'm discussing it. Its value is that it has 20-bit converters and a 24-bit internal signal path that you can access directly through the digital inputs and outputs. Also, it has the Lexa chip dedicated to reverb, so when you are using other effects like chorus and delay with the reverb is not compromised. One thing I love about all my Lexicon processors is the positive clicking of the rotary encoders. When you're changing a value that, for example, ranges from 1 to 100 and changes by ones, the clicking rotary encoder makes it easier to hit an exact number. Its weakness is that even used 25 years later, it's still more dollars than most people are willing to pay. It's the most expensive unit on this list. You can pick one up used for about $1,200. I picked mine up in the year 2000 for $1,000, which was pretty good since it was only 2 years old. For some production perspective, the PCM81 and 91 came out at the same time to replace the PCM80 and 90. On the hard-to-find scale, it rates a 9. 5 years ago, you'd find a dozen of them listed on eBay and Reverb. I know because I was looking, thinking about picking up a second one. Now you're lucky if there are two. I'm not sure if it's a fad or a trend, but like I said before, hardware effects processors are going up in value, especially the good ones. Before I close, if you're not a hardware kind of person and you think it's better to just do it all in the box, I understand. But check out my episode entitled, Should You Use Hardware Effects with Your DAW or Just Do It All in the Box? You may find it interesting. Hopefully I haven't wasted your time. Take care, and I'll be back in another episode soon.